For many of us, especially those in the sandwich generation, there are difficult conversations ahead that we may need to have with our aging parents. They're never easy conversations to begin with, but they should be made a top priority. Curious about how to get started? Well, we'll share some thoughts and some best ideas with you right now on UBS Trending. Hello, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your host, Anthony Pastore. I am joined by my two amazing and terrific colleagues, Ainsley Carbone and Katie Williams from the Chief Investment Office. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Listen, this is probably not an easy topic for us to talk about, especially those of us who have parents of a certain age. Luckily, I knock on wood when I say mine are generally healthy, and that's a really good thing. But there are a lot of discussions that many of us should be, if we're not already having, with our aging parents. So Ainsley, I know you've got a couple of things to share with the audience today. What are the two things right now that on the top of your list that we in the sandwich generation should be sharing with our parents?
Yeah, just to clarify, I want to say, when we think about the sandwich generation, there are two parts of it. There's someone who has to take care of their child, but then also their parents. For this conversation, we're just going to be focusing on, I'd say, the top bun of the sandwich generation, because we want to make sure that we're focusing on the parent aspect of that. So with that being said, I'd say the first thing that you want to talk about is long-term care. Now, I'm not talking about long-term care insurance. It really just kind of comes down to speaking with your parents about, okay, if you need care, at what point, when would you like to go into a nursing home? Would you like to receive care at home? If you do need care, how would you plan to pay for that? There are a lot of questions that are involved with it, but I think just starting that conversation, even though it's a difficult one, is really important.
It is a difficult. I feel very blessed that my parents thought ahead and did that a few years back. But for most people, they're probably wondering, well, how would my parents pay for this? What do you usually recommend if that question comes up?
There are definitely a lot of ways that you can pay for it. I mean, there's self-funding. You could self-fund in a health savings account. There's long-term care insurance. Really, there's no right way to do it. It kind of depends. It's a case-by-case basis type of deal. But I'd say the most important thing that you need to do is make sure that you're having that conversation and make sure that your parents are at least incorporating those potential expenses into their financial plan. That way they'll be able to understand, okay, if I do need care, what's that impact going to be on my financial plan? Am I going to be able to fund that care? And if not, what do I need to do to make sure that I will be able to fund that someday?
Right, important stuff right there. So there's another important conversation that we should be having. What's the other one?
Estate planning. So again, not a
Strikes fear in the heart of people when you hear those words.
Exactly. It's really not a fun conversation to have, but it is something that needs to happen sooner rather than later, because oftentimes it's too late and you don't want to have to deal with all the legal and financial aspects when you're already in such a stressful time. I think the most important thing, feel free to jump in if you'd like, but I think it's most important to understand, okay, if my parents do pass away, who do I go to talk to about this? Who do I know? Do I have the contact information for their lawyer? Do I have the contact information for their financial advisor? Again, not a good conversation to have, but knowing that information just makes it easier when that time does come.
Yeah. And it's something that I know maybe we were dealing with. My father is very organized and has everything in envelopes and it's in the safe. He's like, everything is here. And I find myself to be very blessed in that regard, because I bet there are a lot of folks out there who've never even heard these words from their parents. So Katie, this might be a ridiculous question to ask, but why do we need to have these conversations? Because I bet there are people that are going, I'm good, I don't need to do this with my parents, but they do.
Well, of course, let's be clear, this is an awkward conversation. Now, in your family, this may have been a natural progression in the conversation, but for most people, the role reversal is awkward. And I think sometimes we have a fear around that, and because of that fear, we choose not to do it. But these issues don't go away. It's our mortality, right? And we talk about this long-term planning. We talk about being in a moment of crisis, and it's very much like a parachute, right? Once you need it, you can't get it. So we need to take a step back and prepare. Now, some things to be aware of and just be conscious of. You talked about, your father being really organized, your father being prepared, but I think for most families, this is not going to be something they've gone through. And so the first thing you want to do when you're talking with your family, in most part, like me as a child, I'm the one who is bringing this up with my parents. And to do so, you have to stop and remember, let's pick a time when we can do this where it's quiet and we're not going to be disturbed. We're not going to be distracted. Because we will look for exit ramps to get out of this if we can. And so you want to be respectful to the process they're going to go through in starting this. So really that's a big one, is just being very mindful of when and where you bring this up.
Right, and it's also, and for those of us who have siblings, that's maybe a conversation that you might want to have with them beforehand before you go into this deep conversation with it. Maybe they want to be there, maybe they don't want to be there, and we'll have you be the messenger, but that's something else to probably consider too.
Well, and that's a great point. As you're raising this and starting this conversation, be very clear that this is not a single event. Planning is a process, and it's going to take time to go through that, especially if you're wanting to integrate siblings who may live out of state or who are not able to be there. You want to encourage them to say, this is going to be a process, and my motivation here is just to help you through that process and be prepared and help you evaluate decisions. Ainsley talked about long-term care. Maybe you want to be able to give them some thoughts and some guidance on what are my options and help them evaluate those.
And the one and done approach, again, not really, you can't just set it and then forget it. You've got to follow up.
Right, and back to Ainsley's, long-term care example, you want to be specific when you're talking to your parents. If we just rolled up to a conversation in the middle of dinner and said, tell me about your planning, I don't know that you're going to get very far, but if you're very specific and showing how sincere and saying, Mom, Dad, I just really want to make sure that if something happened, you're getting the care you want in the place you want. So help me understand what you want. And that's going to give them focus and start the conversation, and then you can pivot and go to other concerns there.
You said something earlier that I think is really important, is that a lot of times people don't plan for this unless they have had this type of experience before, and I think that could not be more true. It's typically a parent who has had their own parent go through the process of needing long-term care, and that younger person is trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to pay for this, and also how am I going to make sure that they're comfortable when they need this care. And so if anyone is listening and you aren't someone who has gone through that unfortunate experience of seeing a loved one go through the process of needing that care and funding that care, it could not be a more important thing to talk about.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I watched both of my parents do that with their parents when they passed away. I've had friends, unfortunately, lose parents who they had to sift through so much paperwork in the moments after their parents' death when you should be mourning, but they had to deal with all of that stuff that they didn't know their parents had or did not have. So that's not the time you want to have that question running around your head. What did my mom or father have? I don't know where to even start.
In my particular situation, what really spurred the conversation was my mother's best friend had a diagnosis fairly young, right? She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So it was terminal, but it wasn't sudden. And what that allowed me to do is open that door. And in doing that, I had to be very respectful and cognizant of their desire to remain independent and even a level of privacy. I'm their youngest child. So in doing that, utilizing in a moment in which it was hard for all of us, I was able to start a conversation out of a place of love and show them that I really was there to help them. Right.
Because obviously with those of us with parents, the parents don't want to feel like the children, even though in your head you're thinking, I'm now the parent, especially those of us in the top and bottom bun sandwich generation. But no, those are really great points, Katie. And again, I think just as you both said, go in with kindness, with an open heart, be patient. It's a difficult conversation for you as much as it is for them, maybe even more so because it's about their mortality and things that we don't want to necessarily have to think about. But this is great conversation stuff, and I hope that people out there watching are taking some notes and saying, you know what, I'm going to try it. This is a long time coming. Let's get this going. Yeah, thank you both. Good to see you.
Same here.
Sobering conversation, but always love to have you both here. You shine a light on the studio in difficult conversations. So thanks for being here, both of you. Ainsley Carbone, Katie Williams from CIO. And thank you all for joining us. We hope that there's some takeaways that you're thinking about right now in your head and digesting and thinking, I've got to try this. So good luck, everybody out there. It's not easy, but you can do it and follow the bouncing dots of what Katie and Ainsley were just chatting about. There's more information which you can find on our insights page at ubs.com/views. And also make sure to follow UBS in general on social media. We're on all the platforms, and most importantly, we're on our brand new UBS Trending Instagram channel. There's lots of great stories up there, and also some never before seen footage from the studio that you don't get to watch in the full show. So please check that out again at UBS Trending on Instagram. And make sure to connect with your financial advisor if you have questions, or your parents' financial advisor, as the case may be. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and remember to keep your eyes on what's trending. See you soon, everybody.